The sounds of the 50s, the shared memory of hawker calls and a bidding to good food. But the 50s were far from comforting. They were times of uneven lifestyles and few shared values. What you ate defined who you were and where you came from. Our personal stories and images present a 50s Singapore that was full of contrast. Evening strolls were a popular pastime in the 50s. One of the most pleasant ones would have been at the Esplanade. A showpiece of life uncluttered, unhectic, unworried. In 1953, this place was renamed Queen Elizabeth Walk to honour the coronation. We were still Crown property, and as subjects we adorned our streets in loyalty and showed our status for all to see. Splendidly grand on the surface, the country was disjointed at the seams. The colonial method of divide and rule created a society of haves and have-nots. The seat of power and commerce was centred at Collier Quay, Raffles Place, Fullerton Building and High Street. Pristine, ordered, in control. Hawkers were kept out. The anglicised country came complete with a huge lawn and a cricket club.
The cricket club until 1959, the Asians were not allowed to be members.
Lunch at the cricket club served English tastes, light sandwiches and tea, reserving the big meals for the evenings in private clubs and homes with a menu that included meat, potatoes and cream. The low priority given to lunch continued onto the shopping area of High Street. There was no local fare, only a Western-style cafe serving cakes and French-style curry puffs.
In those days, we had marble top and rattan chairs, and those who patronize our cafe are those judges, lawyers, because of our strategic location near the High Court. And also the Thai, after shopping at Metro, Aurora, those days they were very popular, very prestigious shops. They would come and relax. And also our cakes and curry puff, not many people can afford because for those days it's quite expensive. Only when the children did well, then the mom said, I bring you to Paula Cafe and give you a treat just to motivate them and steer them out.
In the 50s, the city workers' lunch routine had yet to be established. With a monthly pay of under $100, there were reasons to be frugal.
They were not prepared to spend money in those days, you see. The salaries were low as well, and you had to be very careful with the money because their wives never worked. The men were largely their wage earners, you see. They were the ones who brought in the money. And there was not much time, because the lunch was 1 to 2. A lot of people just brought home what you call the tiffin, ate in the office itself.
Hidden away in the city, in the back lanes of Hill Street, however, there was food, plenty of it. A 30-cent bowl of noodles and other dishes could be called up quickly in coffee shops or street stalls. These catered to the labourers. Just a bridge away was the harbour and Singapore River. Many of the workers were from China, out here on their own. They had no families, no wives to cook for them, and no tiffins. The stalls fed them with food from their homeland. Office workers who wanted to eat out joined them.
以前那个咖啡店那角川码头啊，很多工人啊，后来就有那个政府官员啊，在那边呢也是过来吃， 所以生活会慢慢好起来了。
Some of the meals of the everyman have survived to become food of our heritage. One of these is bak chor mee.
bak chor mee 它是没有放鱼饼啊、鱼圆啊这种才是 bak chor mee， 如果有放就不是 bak chor mee 了。
Mr. Tang's father started the stall in 1932 in Hill Street. The business has since moved, but the food hasn't altered much.
他以前在中国的那个潮州那个地方学了才过来的。
Bak chor mee is flat noodles, cooked al dente and tossed in a chili vinegar sauce, then garnished with pork, liver and a piece of dried sole. This is Teochew straight through. The only variation is the soup.
它的汤头有点不同，比较清淡啊。我们本地的是会比较浓一点的，比较好喝。我14岁的时候就开始了，以前学辛苦了，从捧面开始了啊，捧面了才学习做这个料，才学习煮，大概3年了。之后17岁的时候就开始正式接手就煮面，煮到现在。以前码头的工人这只是要吃饱。 现在的人他是要吃它的味道不同，好吃的东西他们多远他都会跑过来吃的。
1970s, 1990s. New abacus, new method, 21st century, intelligent, new era abacus. Counting down, November 2012.
你的鱼新不新鲜的？
当然新鲜啦，大姐。Charleston Seafood reserves the right to define fresh as coming from the ocean no later than 20 days from the moment of capture, excluding transit time in freight.
At NTUC Income, we'll never hide behind small print. We believe insurance should be made simple, made honest, made different.
The goodness of milk in one small tablet. Omical, the organic calcium supplement from natural milk source.
I miss you too, Dad. What is this? Let's discuss this over a tiger. Vamos a hablarlo tomando una tiger.
Gracias.
Vamos a hablarlo tomando una tiger.
Ты что делаешь, придурок?
Давай выпьем пиво, tiger.
Давай. Vamos resolver isso com uma tiger.
Okay.
Are you ready to play your part at Legoland? Fight fires and save the day. Brave the fiercest dragons. Legoland Malaysia at Nusa Jaya Johor, the first in Asia. Play your part.
Wherever you may be, one bank is embracing the future and placing its power in your hands. The future is here. Welcome to the future of banking. DBS, Living, Breathing Asia.
Backlane eating was considered low class in the early 50s, frowned upon by the Europeans.
Because of the diseases prevalent at that time, I think yellow fever, typhoid, cholera, because of the unhygienic conditions existing, my parents, particularly my father, absolutely forbade me to eat that hawker food.
Ronnie Pinsler was born in Singapore and into a European lifestyle. In the 50s, the worlds didn't mix. It was a white world, white lifestyle.
My parents were coming from Romania, so they would have, I suppose, continental dishes. Meat dishes were very common, steaks, lamb. There would be some eating of pork, but not much. I'm just trying to remember. I think they made an attempt later on to get into curries. Fish and chips was very common. It was mostly fairly bland food. I think butter was a rarity in the 1950s because I actually grew up not being used to eating butter with my bread. I think this came later. I think it was to do with refrigeration. I'm not sure if I'm wrong on this, but of course there was always cold storage, but I think it's when the refrigerators only became reliable that you could keep butter in the house. So maybe butter was something for the kids of the 1960s or the very late 50s, but not the early ones.
Joining their world were two domestic help, a maje and a cook.
Cookie is the person employed to do the cooking in the house, the cook boy, you could say. I mean, there's an unpleasant term to address a servant as boy in the old days of Cologne. So we either call him by his name, in which his real name was Akyat, but I would call him Cookie during my childhood. And then there was, first Achung was the Cantonese mache. Chung actually traveled with us to Europe, to Italy, in the 50s. And then she left, and then Ato came with Cookie, I think around about 1956.
The daily routine of marketing was done by the domestic help. Specialty items, however, were hand-picked.
There were specialists that existed in Beach Road that actually supplied, upon request, things like halva, olives, even, I think items like salami. Once a month, the shipments would come in, and the tauke would give a call, and then we'd go along and pick up our supplies. When I say we, I mean my father and his partner and other Romanian family members, because I had cousins too. There were 6 of us children.
Between the East and West Divide, a connection was made through food. Hainanese men had a reputation for being good with Western cuisine, and in time, the group would help to change our food culture. In the 50s, however, they remained mostly in personal households and trusted with cooking suitably for a Western palate.
Cookie, I believe, was a Hainanese, so he did have a cooking background. There would be a lot of big dinners at home, and Cookie would prepare. So sometimes other family members would lend their helpers along, so the cookies of other households would come over and help with the cookout. Basically, it was left to the devices of the cooks.
Within this milieu of cultural mix, clear food boundaries still existed. The domestics ate their own food, and a child was forced to make decisions.
And of course, I was always eating with the mache, and it got to a stage where I didn't like my parents' Western food very much at all, which I don't think made them very happy.
Ronnie's memory of life with his ama gave us an insight into her world and her food.
Because my parents were traveling a lot at that time, so she took her charge, 3 years old, 4 years old, in the very early 1950s. To a village in Changi. We might be there for 3 days in the village, and it would be for a deity's birthday, like Tau Pe Kong or Kuan Yim's birthday, something like that. There would be the wayang, and the one food that I remember that I particularly liked and always could not have enough of was the what I think is called tawa, soya bean curd with the cane sugar that I still like up to today. And every time I have it, I do have these flashbacks into the past.
The story of Amache is full of contrasts, looking after children but remaining single, living among wealth but poor, surrounded by family but dying alone. Their hope was to return to China, but when the time came, many spent their final moments in the death houses of Chinatown.
Any day can have a Magnum Mini moment. New Magnum Mini Pistachio and Gianduja. Magnum, for pleasure seekers.
Looking for property? Check out the International Property Expo, 2nd to 4th November, Marina Bay Sands Expo and Convention Center. Brought to you by iProperty.com.
Wherever you may be, one bank is embracing the future and placing its power in your hands. The future is here. Welcome to the future of banking. DBS, Living, Breathing Asia.
Discover the fresh new flavor of apple and mint. Ricola Apple Mint. 13 soothing herbs combined with natural fruity apple mint.
I'm gonna miss you too, Dad. What is this? Let's discuss this over a tiger. Vamos a hablarlo tomando una tiger.
Gracias.
Vamos a hablarlo tomando una tiger.
Ты что делаешь, придурок?
Давай выпьем пиво, tiger.
Давай. Vamos resolver isso com uma tiger.
Auntie, why so sad? My salary is late. I don't get CPF. Even with an MC, my pay gets cut, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to take leave.
Auntie, don't worry. We have rights as workers. If you are treated unfairly at work, you should call this helpline. And all calls are confidential.
Hey, the call worked. I'm not paid on time, and pay won't be cut if I have an MC. I also had CPF, annual leave, plus extra money, thanks to Workfare.
It's so nice to see my staff happy. As your boss, I may have overlooked some things before, but I'm glad I put things right.
I know my rights.
I do it right.
Last Sunday, Watercolors EC held a Watercolors Weekend Fiesta to thank their valued customers as well as to introduce a series of developer-enhanced new features. The day was packed with fun-filled activities. So how do you guys feel?
We are great.
So come on down to Pasir Ris Drive 4 on this Sunday, 4th November and have a splashing good time with us.
Tiffin. The Tiffin is a metal carrier. Its origin, debatable. Its purpose, clear. Food. To use. Lift the lever. Slide out the containers. Layer by layer. Remove the handle. Fill the bottom layer with things that spill. Example, soup. Fill the middle with a starchy component. Example, rice. Fill the top with nice stuff. Example, sauce. To repack, slot into the handle, bottoms up. Lid and lock down. To open, reverse action. Lunch is ready.
The noodle is a container upon which history and culture is built. From bak chor mee to char kway teow to wonton mee, the noodle is individualized and claimed by each dialect group. Through this, food marked the cultural boundaries of Chinatown even back in the 1950s. To understand that, we go back to pre-war Singapore. The 30s brought unprecedented prosperity from trade. Tides of Chinese flowed into the land of hope. The colonial system of town planning segmented the Chinese into the area known as Chinatown today. They were further divided into dialect groups, creating enclaves within an enclave. A semblance of this division still marks Chinatown today. Hokkien in Telok Ayer, Teochews in Boat Quay, and Cantonese in South Bridge Road. Because of colonial division, food from each dialect group did not cross its designated boundary.
I can remember later in the 50s, 60s, we would, at night, we were hungry, we'd always go to Hokkien Street. And they had all the tables and chairs in the street, and everyone ate Hokkien noodles, which were soupy noodles. So the Hokkiens eat it that way, but the Cantonese eat it dry. You know, it's very different, the noodles that are made by different racial groups.
Geraldine was a frequent visitor to Chinatown with her ama in the pre-war years. Today, she's a frequent visitor as a tourist guide.
I can always remember the old lady sitting on the stoop, you know, of the step of the van and peeling vegetables and cutting away, which I guess most Westerners would just chuck, you know, everything away that was a bit woody or so on, but they would peel all the skin off the cauliflower and the, you know, the vegetables and cook it up. Every part was used, you know, in a soup or stir fry or so. So they were very, very frugal, which they had to be. Most of those houses, the kitchen was on the ground floor at the back. And those 40 people or so had to share the kitchen. So you had to sort of coordinate and make sure, you know, you didn't step on somebody else's toes or there'd be a few fights in the kitchen.
By the 1950s, Chinatown was home to other races, but the old lifestyle remained. Cluttered quarters, living on basics, and daily life spent outdoors. A contrast to the group known as the King's Chinese, the Peranakans. Peranakan history predates colonial Singapore. Their culture and food thrived because of assimilation. In pre-war Singapore, they were the elite class, titled the King's Chinese because of their loyalty to the crown and assimilated Western lifestyle. Because of overcrowding in Chinatown, they were allowed to move in with genteel society out on the East Coast. Their stately seaside homes emulated the Western lifestyle showcased by the Seaview Hotel. This lifestyle dwindled when their fortunes ended during the war. By the mid-50s, many were ready to change loyalties. In the 1955 elections for a limited self-government, the King's Chinese voted for independence from the Crown. To celebrate the small victory against British rule, the Merdeka Bridge was opened in 1956. Over it ran the Nicole Highway, which facilitated travel between the city centre and the home ground of the Peranakans, Katong. The architecture of Katong reflects a psyche of mix and match. The food, likewise. The Nyonya Peranakan woman's cuisine thrives on slow cooking, accentuated by fresh and natural ingredients. The vibrant colours and flavours were extracted from homegrown plants.
Hey, bunga telang, you know, I'm surprised to see it growing by the street side. But this used to be the colouring for the famous Nyonya cakes and the bak chang, which is a glutinous rice. I wonder whether anybody owns it or uses the flowers. These and the pandan leaves are quintessential household plants for Peranakans because we use them for colouring and for flavouring. Lovely to see them by the roadside. I grew up here in the 50s until middle of 70s.
Cynthia Weehofer is a proud Peranakan and lived in one of the more unusual houses in the area.
This is where I lived, 150Q down this lane. And Kona's Confectionery, where I grew up in, famous for suji cakes and friends of ours. This whole row of terrace houses had really a multiracial element to it. The last house I remember was the house of the Solomons. They were Jewish and they were actually confectioners, and apparently they were the ones who gave the recipe for the famous suji cake. That's the myth. And then we had Malay neighbors. We had lots of Peranakan families here, some Teochew families, Eurasian families. So this whole row was always full of fun and different festivities which we all shared. You know, this lane is also like food alley for us because we had a parade of hawkers. Sometimes we counted as like 35 in all. And what was striking was getting fresh milk from the cow. There was this, what we call the bai, who would lead his cow door to door, calling out his ware. And then you bring in your milk tin and he would milk the cow in front of you. And so that was how we get our milk, and you normally will boil it a bit and drink it.
Katong is known for its home-cooked Nyonya food, yet one of its icons is a ready-made snack, tau kwa pao. It was created by a Teochew hawker, using bits of braised duck, eggs, fried yam, fish balls, cucumber, and stuffed into a tofu. This became a hit with Nonyas, a tasty, convenient snack while they engaged in their favorite pastime, gambling.
So this is the original tau kwa pao, which I call all pao. So that's why I have a confusion. They are iconic in Katong. They were across the road and now they've moved here, but the grandson is still operating this stall. Everything is made by you all, the duck, everything, the sauces. It looks exactly the same and I'm sure it tastes as good. The sauce is the main thing. The sauce is with the green chilies, right? Your sauce is still with the green vinegar and yums. What is tau kwa pao made up of?
Start with fish balls, yam, cucumber.
Yeah, cucumber. Do you have meat also?
Last time had.
Now you don't put in the meat? Why not?
Nowadays people like blend.
But they can order extra with meat. So the fish balls also made by you all? Factory, okay.
The original location of the tau kwa pao was this coffee shop. It marked the entrance to a street named after a man who developed Katong as a gift to the community. This collective memory has only just begun. The story of our food, our history, continues.